Imagine suing the government 37 times so you didn't have to issue a marriage license to a gay couple in love. Why? Well, maybe it's because you've had 4 husbands but you're still unhappy, so you keep trying to make everyone else as unhappy as you are. Meet Kim f***ing Davis. Be sure to get your copy of Red Hats, a pocket guidebook of over 1,000 companies that support the convicted felon Donald Trump and make lying wrong again pins. Grab yours now at ProfessorPride.com. Kim Davis, known back then as Kimberly Jean Bailey, was born in September 1965 in a small town in Kentucky. But if you were alive back then, you might have felt a seismic shift in the earth as the daughter of Satan was born. I mean, all kidding aside, there was actually a 4.9 magnitude earthquake that hit San Francisco, California, the capital of neighborhoods, at the same exact time that Kim Davis was born. But that's just a coincidence, right? Anyway, at just 18 years old, she married Dwayne Allen Wallace, her first of many husbands to come. In 1990, she gave birth to Casey Nicole, her first of 4 children. Her first real job came a year later, working for her mother, Jean W. Bailey. Her mom was the chief deputy clerk of Rowan County, with a total population of about 18,000 people at the time. Kim was a registered Democrat that had a salary of $51,812 per year, with an additional $11,000 in overtime pay, as she helped her mom write marriage licenses for couples across the county. Basically, she was the assistant to the assistant to the regional manager.
Assistant to the assistant to the regional manager.
Now, why would an AARM, whose only job is to sign marriage licenses for just 18,000 people, need any overtime, let alone $11,000 worth? Who knows? But what we do know is she earned more than any other person in her position, and her pay was so high that residents across the county started complaining that the clerk's office was spending too much on salaries, more than any other branch of their local government. 1 year later, in 1992, Kim gave birth to Erin Elizabeth. 2 years after that, she gave birth to 2 more children, Allison Mae and Nathan. But Dwayne, her husband at the time, was not the father of either of them.
You are not!
So 10 years after her marriage began, Dwayne filed for divorce on the grounds that Kim was being unfaithful. Kim spent the next 2 years looking for another man, and then married Joe Davis in 1996. She spent the next 10 years with him before he too files for divorce, telling people she had a lot of problems being unfaithful back then. Are you starting to see a pattern yet? Less than a year later, she married Thomas Dale McIntyre Jr., whom she spent less than a year with before he too files for divorce in 2008. 1 year after that divorce, she remarries Joe Davis. And it's at this point in the story when her mom, who was the one signing marriage licenses, must have been sick and tired of seeing her own daughter's name come across her desk so many times. Kim was still working as the assistant to the assistant in her mom's office, still making more than any other person in her position. The county residents were fed up with the salaries at the clerk's office being too high, and their complaints falling on deaf ears. So in 2012, the county residents sued the clerk's office where Kim worked, requesting their salaries be lowered to an amount equal to all other branches of their local county government. Ultimately, the court ruled in favor of the county residents and ordered the clerk's office to lower the salaries of all of their employees, so their yearly budget would go from $300,000 to just $200,000, which is still overpaying them if you ask me. Now with a smaller salary, coincidentally her mother announced she would not seek re-election in 2014. So Kim Davis then announced her candidacy for county clerk. She ran and won as a Democrat in a county with vastly more Democrats than Republicans voting. Yes, you heard that right. A majority of registered voters in Rowan County, Kentucky are Democrats, and Kim Davis ran and won as a registered Democrat too. When she began her job as county clerk in January 2015, Kim was being paid over $80,000 per year, almost half of the entire department's yearly budget. And it's been reported that she even hired her children to work for her office, just as she worked for her mom years ago. But that summer, something incredible happened. The Supreme Court of the United States ruled on the landmark case Obergefell v. Hodges on June 26, 2015, ruling same-sex couples could get married in any state, and all other states would have to uphold that marriage. This would later be known as Marriage Equality Day in the United States. Thus, Kentucky's governor at the time, Steve Beshear, also a Democrat by the way, ordered all Kentucky county clerks to begin issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples immediately. Kim then reached out to Steve, asking for an executive order exemption from the Supreme Court ruling that every other county clerk across the nation had to follow. Steve refused, and so Kim Davis just decided to deny marriage licenses to any same-sex couple anyway, even though it was her only job, for which she was paid over $80,000 per year to do. On July 7, 2015, David Ermold and David Moore, an engaged couple wanting a marriage license, went into Kim's office asking for her to process their application. When Kim refused, the couple turned on their camera to start recording her. They later released the video and it went viral overnight. With protests erupting across the state after this viral video and pressure coming down on her office from federal authorities telling her to do her job, Kim Davis just decided to not issue marriage licenses to any couple, straight or gay. So now she was being paid $80,000 per year in an elected position to literally not do anything. By July 10th, just 14 days after the Supreme Court ruling, 6 couples whom Kim refused to issue a marriage license for sued her in court. 4 of them were same-sex couples and 2 of them were straight couples. By the way, this shows her office only served 6 couples in a 2-week period. It makes you wonder why they had 7 staff members who all needed overtime for that little workload. But maybe that's just as fast as Kim Davis can go. In court, Kim Davis testified that issuing a marriage license violated her religious beliefs under the First Amendment. Now, at this point in the story, you might be wondering what those religious beliefs are, since she was on her 4th husband at the time and had children with men outside of those marriages. But no matter how hypocritical it was of her, Kim stood by her religious beliefs anyway. You might also wonder why she would sign up for a job to sign marriage certificates if she thought it was against her religious beliefs to sign them. That would be something you would think someone would ask themselves before running for office. The 6 couples suing her, called the plaintiffs, argued in court she could just let one of her many deputies or assistants issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. That way it would not violate her religious beliefs, but still follow the Supreme Court ruling. It was a fair compromise in my opinion, but keep this compromise in mind because I promise we'll come back to it later. Kim Davis counter-argued that stepping aside or resigning from her position would be, quote, solving nothing. It helps nobody. In fact, her lawyers argued that anyone wanting a marriage license in her county, straight or gay, could just travel to any other county surrounding them to get a marriage license there instead. Yes, because it's up to everyone else to travel out of their way to get something you're paid to process and legally obligated to give them. At this time, Kim was still refusing to issue anyone a marriage license, gay or straight. In fact, while she was being sued by these 6 couples, Kim Davis sued Governor Beshear because he issued this order to all Kentucky clerks to give marriage licenses to same-sex couples and didn't give her an exemption. Her lawsuit against the governor argued, quote, I want an exemption and I want it now. A month later, on August 12th, the court decided Kim Davis must issue marriage licenses to any couple, no matter their sexual orientation. They wrote in their unanimous decision, quote, it cannot be defensively argued that the holder of the Rowan County Clerk's office may decline to act in conformity with the United States Constitution. Kim Davis then appealed this decision to the United States Supreme Court. On August 31st, just 19 days later, the Supreme Court responded to Kim's appeal request with just one sentence, refusing to take her appeal. In other words, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled Kim Davis would have to issue marriage licenses to any couple, no matter their sexual orientation. Kim went all the way to the United States Supreme Court and lost. So that's the end of the road for Kim Davis, right? Wrong. Kim was far from done. When she went back to the office the following day, she continued denying any couples a marriage license, gay or straight. Those couples then filed a petition to the court, claiming Kim Davis was now refusing to comply with the United States Supreme Court order. Judge Bunning, who heard this petition, ordered Davis and her 6 deputies to appear before him on September 3rd. The judge then held Kim Davis in contempt of court and ordered she be placed in custody until she complied with the order. On Friday, September 4th, with Kim Davis now in jail, the 6 deputy clerks finally began issuing marriage licenses to any couples, no matter their sexual orientation. While she was in jail, Kim filed an appeal to the court, saying her deputies could issue a marriage license to same-sex couples, and she would be okay with that, as long as her name was not on the marriage license. So basically, she was asking for the same thing all 6 of the plaintiffs in the original case were asking for. It's funny how a spoiled little girl, who never thought there would be any consequences for her actions, was suddenly a lot more willing to compromise now that she was behind bars. She also petitioned Governor Beshear to free her from jail, but the governor immediately refused her request. 5 days later, on September 8th, Kim was released from jail with an order from Judge Bunning stating that Kim cannot interfere, directly or indirectly, with the efforts of her deputy clerks issuing marriage licenses to any legally eligible couples. He also ordered the 6 deputy clerks to file status reports to him every 14 days, confirming their compliance and confirming that Kim was not interfering with their work. By the way, what the hell is wrong with Kentucky that a judge ruled employees have to confirm their manager is not getting in the way of their work? Meanwhile, their manager is still making $80,000 a year. That same week, Kim Davis also got a visit from Pope Francis, where the Pope told her to, quote, stay strong, and gave her 2 rosaries as a gift. 2 days later, the press office for the Pope issued a statement saying, quote, the Pope did not enter into the details of the situation of Mrs. Davis, and his meeting with her should not be considered a form of support of her position. Sure, I'm sure the Pope meets with people he disagrees with all the time, and tells them to stay strong while handing them presents. Anyway, a week later, Kim Davis went back to work. On her first day back, she changed the writing on all marriage licenses her office would issue from then on.
I'm taking my name off this thing.
This way, they would no longer have her name attached to them. The ACLU then filed a lawsuit with the court, claiming these new marriage forms were legally questionable. They argued that if a couple had this new marriage certificate, it was not written as a license, but just as a legal certificate, which could be challenged again. Ultimately, the court ruled that these new forms were probably legal, but at least now Kim Davis was abiding by the court's order. In December 2015, Matt Bevin, a Republican, took over as governor of Kentucky. One of his first official acts as governor was to remove any clerk of court's name from a marriage license. This way, no clerk across the state had to sign a marriage license that went against their religious beliefs. Basically, it gave everyone in this case what they wanted all along. Couples could still get a marriage license, and Kim Davis could shut the f*** up. So that's it. Everyone got what they wanted all along, and the case of Kim Davis is closed, right? Wrong again. A few months later, Kim Davis filed a motion asking the U.S. Court of Appeals to overturn 4 of Judge Bunning's orders, including the one holding her in contempt of court. It stated these court orders made Kim choose between her religious beliefs and her freedom. The Federal Court of Appeals denied this motion on November 5th. The very next day, on November 6th, Kim Davis then filed another appeal, requesting a delay in issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples again, arguing the earlier court order should only be applied to the 6 couples that sued her, not any other couple walking into her office later. This, too, was denied by the Federal Court of Appeals just 2 days later. In other words, the court was getting tired of Kim Davis wasting their time and thinking she was somehow special. A few months later, in March 2016, a nonprofit filed a right-to-know request. Basically, this is a request anyone can make to force government officials to release documents or other records to the public, and it's one of the many ways we keep government agencies operating transparently with the public. This nonprofit wondered how much taxpayer money went to pay for Kim Davis's lawyers in all of those lawsuits so far, but Kim Davis refused to comply with this right-to-know request, stating the amount of taxpayer money that was paid to her lawyers was a private matter that only Kim and her lawyers had the authority to see. A month later, in April, the nonprofit refiled the request, but again, Kim refused. This meant the request immediately went to the Attorney General's office, which then had to privately review the records and determine if those records should be publicly available under the right-to-know request or not. In June 2016, 1 year after this saga began, the Attorney General said Kim Davis had violated the Open Records Act, saying Kim was, quote, intentionally frustrating the Attorney General's review of an open records request. In other words, she was annoying the out of the Attorney General at this point. While this was going on, Kim Davis was writing another appeal to the court, stating that since the new governor had mandated clerk names be taken off of marriage certificates, the lawsuits from these 6 original couples should be overturned. And since the new marriage licenses no longer had any clerk of court's name on it, the judge agreed and dismissed those cases. But since Kim Davis just poked the hornet's nest once again with these 6 couples who already sued her, the couples sued her again, this time demanding they be allowed to recoup the $230,000 they spent in legal fees to get their marriage license from Kim Davis originally. The judge ruled those couples should be allowed to recoup those fees, and demanded the county pay for the $230,000. But then the county filed a motion saying they shouldn't have to pay for the actions of one clerk, even though she was elected and they probably had insurance to cover elected officials anyway. So Kim was then ordered to pay the $230,000 out of her personal funds. Keep in mind, at this point, Kim was a rising star in the Republican Party, who was closely tied to Mike Huckabee, a man who was even asking his supporters to donate money to her personally. While the exact number of donations is not known publicly, it's estimated by some to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So in theory, she could pay for this $230,000 and still have made a profit off of this whole venture. Kim then filed an appeal, and in May 2017, the Cincinnati Federal Appeals Court overturned this ruling, saying if the county doesn't want to pay for it and Kim Davis doesn't want to pay for it, it should be a state issue. By the way, since when is it the court's option to say, oh, you don't want to do this? Well, okay, we won't make you. So the court ruled that the state of Kentucky was obligated to pay $222,000 in legal fees to reimburse these couples. Seemingly in an effort to make fun of Kim Davis, in July of 2017, a law school graduate filed for a marriage license in Kim's office to marry his laptop computer. When she denied the request, he sued her, dragging her ass into court again. In 2018, Kim ran for re-election, but this time as a Republican. In the primary election, she ran unopposed. But on the Democratic side, 4 people ran in the primary to challenge her, including David Ermold, who Kim Davis denied a marriage license to back in 2015. Ultimately, the primary election winner for the Democrats was Eldred Claudel Jr. In November 2018's general election, Kim Davis finally lost by a little more than 8 percentage points. In other words, the 80,000 people in her county were tired of Kim putting their county in the national spotlight and costing them money. But sadly, this is not where the story ends, because the Wicked Witch of Kentucky apparently has rejuvenating health and keeps coming back like teenage acne. So far in the story, Kim Davis, now a Republican ever since the 2015 marriage equality ruling, was good friends with the new governor, Matt Bevin, also a Republican, who just helped her with the marriage license issue. But in February 2019, he formally rejected the court's decision that Kentucky should pay the $222,000 in legal fees. He insisted that Kim should be the only one to pay for these legal fees because she was the one who made the couple pay all that money in the first place just to get their marriage license. Kim then appealed this, and the judge in a lower court said Kim was an elected official acting on behalf of the state, so the state should pay the legal fees to the plaintiffs. But the state then appealed this again, eventually ordering the case to go to a jury trial instead of just being heard by a judge. In September 2023, a jury of her peers ordered Kim Davis to personally pay the couples $100,000 in damages and $260,000 in legal fees. Kim then appealed this decision to the U.S. Supreme Court in July 2025. Now, you might have heard Kim Davis is back in the news with reports saying she's asking the Supreme Court to overturn marriage equality. And here's where you might be confused, because legally speaking, all Kim has the right to do in this case is ask the court to overturn the $360,000 she owes these couples. But as we all know by now, Kim Davis is a unique kind of see you next Tuesday, because while she could just ask for the court to let her off the hook for the $360,000, she decided to once again try to overturn marriage equality. In her appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, Kim decided to also request them to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges, which the Supreme Court already ruled on in June 2015, when this legal fight began with Kim fucking Davis. At the time of this recording, the Supreme Court has not made a decision on whether or not they will take this case. Will they hear the case and rule in her favor? Will they hear the case and rule against her? Or will they once again send her a one-sentence denial telling her to stop wasting their time? We don't know for sure. Even experts in predicting Supreme Court cases are conflicted here. Some of them say the court is highly unlikely to take the case, and Fox News is saying there's a good chance they'll overturn Obergefell. In fact, one of the best pieces of advice that we found while researching this piece was to not rely so heavily on just one piece of paper to protect your entire marriage. Instead, you can get your spouse and yourself to sign these 9 documents. That way it protects all of the things that a marriage certificate legally protects, but that way, in case that certificate falls apart on a federal level or gets overturned by the court, you still have these 9 documents to protect all of the legal protections you should have in a marriage anyway. In these situations, it's always best to have a lawyer draw these 9 documents up for you, sign them in the presence of a notary, then file them with your county courthouse and keep a copy of them on you at all times, even if it's just on your phone in your email. This way, if anyone ever questions the rights of your marriage, you can always pull out these documents and show the proof. But it's obvious to us that after 37 times in court and even spending time in jail, Kim Davis will never stop trying to make everyone as miserable as she is. She's had 4 husbands, 2 children inside of those marriages, and 2 more outside of those marriages. The only real job she's ever had was given to her by her mother and then passed down through nepotism. In that job, the court has ruled that she was vastly overpaid. And even though she only had one simple office job to do and was vastly overpaid to do it, she's fought in court for the past 10 years fighting not to do her job. If you walked into work tomorrow and told your boss, "I'm not going to do my job today," you'd be fired on the spot. If you walked into school and told your teacher, "I didn't feel like doing my homework," your teacher would fail you. So I'm baffled Kentucky had anyone at all voting to re-elect a woman who fought for 10 years now and cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars to not do her only job. In my opinion, even if the Supreme Court refuses her appeal and request to overturn marriage equality, Kim Davis will probably never stop trying to make other people miserable. For 37 times now, a court has ruled against her and didn't give Little Miss Princess everything she wanted. But 37 times now, she's filed more lawsuits literally the very next day. This sense of entitlement, wanting everyone else to be as miserable as she is, and this sense of, "I'm gonna sue everyone for everything," only reminds me of one other person on Earth. Now wait a minute, Kim, you're apparently attracted to old men, and you've already been divorced 3 times. I'm sure any judge in our story so far would gladly sign off on a 4th one. It's obvious Melania isn't happy in her marriage either, so it's only a matter of time until she breaks up with Donnie. Plus, you obviously don't think being unfaithful to your partner is a deal breaker, so when Donnie gets on a plane to, let's say, some private island in the Virgin Islands, you won't mind a bit. You're both deeply homophobic, you were both handed jobs and huge salaries by your parents, so I think you would really hit it off. For at least a few years, which is normally all your husbands can take before filing for divorce anyway. Just think, you'll finally be as special as you always felt you should be. Sure, you'll have to put up with Donnie's tiny hands grabbing you without your consent, but it's a very, very small price to pay for getting the infamy you always wanted. And at the end of your story, whenever someone finally throws a bucket of holy water on you and your last words on earth are, "I'm melting," you can be buried on a golf course in New Jersey and visited by no one ever again. Just like you truly f***ing deserve.